Welcome to Conversations Live. For more than a decade, we've brought you the best in books, entertainment, celebrity interviews, and current events. When the movers and shakers of the world have something to say to you, they say it to us first. Here's your host, Cyrus Webb.
Welcome back, everyone, to Conversations Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again. For our radio audience tuning in at WYAD 94.1 FM and WYADonline.com, we're glad that you all can be with us. Also joining us online via our podcast at iHeartRadio and Amazon Music. We're glad you all could be with us as well. We're excited to welcome back author A.S. King. A lot of you guys have got to know her by. Amy King is someone I spoke with a couple years ago with the release of her book, Attack of the Black Rectangles, a great book that was so appropriate at that time, and I think even more timely today, which is great because the paperback edition of the book just came out, and Amy was just sharing with me she has a new book also getting ready to come out right around the corner. We're going to talk to Amy not only about her love of storytelling, but what it's been like for her to see the way that this book has resonated with readers and what she'll be able to take away from it as well. Amy, thank you again for spending some time with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me back, Cyrus. I adore talking books with you.
Well, I appreciate that. So, Amy, I want to begin with Attack of the Black Rectangles. Again, we had this conversation a couple of years ago, and I was prepping for this segment today, and one quote really resonated with me about you in this book. It said that this is the book that you were born to write. So what has it been like for you to see the way that people have responded to Attack of the Black Rectangles?
Oh, wow. I mean, it's been a really interesting 2 years. I think the most amazing thing is always young people. Young people just blow me away every single time. So whether I'm in their schools in person or whether they're writing to me through social media or I have one next to me right now that was handwritten and sent to the address of my bookstore, which is what I have on my website. The support from young people has been incredible because there's, I guess to simplify it, the message is always like, wow, you're an adult who takes us seriously. Wow, we're smart. Wow, you're telling us the truth. Thanks. And also asking a lot of times like how they can help, things like that. So I always say, look, go to my website. There's stuff there. You can download a letter, template, and you can write it to your school board if this is happening in your school district. But for the most part, don't forget, Cyrus, when I wrote this book, what was happening in our country wasn't happening yet. All this fervor for book banning. So it was kind of interesting that I was born to write it, but it was also like, what timing, right? So it's been nothing but beautiful feedback, to be honest, especially from young people who are really appreciative that someone's out there saying, hey, stop lying to children. Children already know the truth, and it's best to have the conversations versus avoiding the conversations.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the big things here. I was thinking about, ways that this conversation would be different for us, Amy, and you're exactly right. I think, for one thing, the world has shifted. It seems like seemingly in the wrong direction on this topic since the last time we talked. But the other side of it is, too, about what we are doing in not being able to share information. And I've seen this in a few conversations I've had, even this year, with the way that history is being treated right now. Of course, topics not being discussed, like what your book alludes to. But you brought up something very important, and that is the curiosity and the intelligence of young people. Is that one of the things that keeps you inspired? Yes. The young people realize that they need to know these things.
Oh, absolutely. Cyrus, I wear many hats. I do many different things, everything from, being a parent, being, an educator, doing all these different things. But my biggest and most important hat is an advocate for young people. I'm a fierce advocate for young people because people underestimate them. And that's really what book banning is. When you tell a young person right over their parents' head, like their parents aren't allowed to say anything, and a young person, you're not allowed to read this book in your school. This book shouldn't be in your school because you can't handle it. It's too much for you. It's going to hurt you or whatever. Like the idea that reading about someone different to you being hurtful is short-sighted, also kind of silly. I was talking earlier today with someone about how so often the influences in my life that were negative are what taught me what not to be. Does that make sense? Somebody used to say to me, how can you hang out with so-and-so? And I'm like, well, I don't really hang out with them. I have to. We're on the same, basketball team or whatever it was. or in the same family for some people. But one of the most valuable lessons I've learned is watching people do things that I would never do and going, oh, I am never going to do those things. And so in a way, I think that limiting the reading of young people is an absolute, it's a very clear message. And it's that you don't respect them. Their opinion doesn't count. They're underestimated. They've lost their own autonomy. And I just think it's really, the young people are seeing that message. That's what they're hearing. They're not feeling so protected, which is, how it's being presented. But removing information from young people is never protection. The more information we have as human beings, the more we can fight the power. You know what I mean?
I think that's such a great point. And it goes to, for those who may not be familiar, Amy, as to how this journey began for us. And that is with the character Mac in the book, Attack of the Black Rectangles. I want to talk about Mac, and for one thing, the courage. I mentioned earlier the curiosity, but also I think there is the way that Mac is able to even get other people to think of things. And one example, I think, in the chapter, the B word, right? And how Mac's rationale, and I thought this was so interesting, where, basically as they're talking about breasts, Mac makes the comment, I mean, if they're own chicken, we can talk about them all day, right? It's so, that seems like such a rational thing to say, but it is like we are living in a world even today that Mac would not recognize. What was it like for you to create a character like Mac that could kind of be the centerpiece of this conversation?
Oh, it was so freeing, really, because Mac's a mix of me and my kids. Because my kids are those kind of kids that would raise their hand and say, I'm sorry, are you saying that slavery didn't exist? Or, I'm sorry, did you just say this? And I mean, I remember in third grade, I raised my hand and said, did you just say that Africans came here as slaves to take advantage of the free enterprise system? I was taught that in third grade by my teacher, and I raised my hand right up because that's what my mom taught me to do. And so I wanted to model that. I wanted to model what I was given, which was, I don't want to call it a big mouth, but more like a curious brain. I don't want to tell someone they're wrong. I just want to ask them, excuse me, did I hear you correctly? But I think that with Mac, he just had that natural ability to raise his hand and ask questions. And I think a lot of that comes from, his home life and the things he's had to deal with. I think he is more mature because of the types of things he's had to go through at home, which is also in the book, and are still confusing to him. But I think it's, the conversation is important. The conversation was always important. My mom taught me critical thinking one easy way. She'd say to me, read the paper every day, still does. And says, she'd come over, she'd say, Amy, come here. It wouldn't matter if I was 6 or 16. She'd say, read this. And I'd read the thing, and she'd say, magical critical thinking question. Here you go. What do you think about that? She never told me what to think about a thing. She asked me what I thought about it. Sometimes, looking back, I didn't even say something she would agree with because I was 10, and I wasn't mature enough to understand the thing, the full nuance, right, of what I was reading. But I think that critical thinking is just so important, and allowing kids to say their piece and have those larger conversations because they are so smart. They're so smart. I mean, after I talked to you last time, I went on a tour and I went to talk to mostly fifth graders, sixth graders. And I would sit there and I'd ask one question and the conversation would go. And I'm like, wow, this is probably one of the most intellectual conversations I've had in a long time. We really underestimate kids. We really undershoot when we really think about how much they really know and how much they want to know and how curious they are.
Right. I think that is it, and I think, too, the empathy of Mac, it also comes through in this book, and I had a chance, of course, when the conversation was booked with you, Amy, to go back and to reread it, and I thought the chapter Waiting and Waiting and Waiting, where Mac says, that he would not want to be any other type of person, and if he was like some of the other mean people, the quote was, I don't think I could ever forgive myself. What is your hope for those that maybe aren't as open as Mac, weren't raised in situations like Mac where they could be able to think, for themselves and to question things. What do you hope a book like this does in kind of opening their minds to the permission they have to do that?
Oh, what a great question. I got a letter the other year. I have a book called Dig. It's for young adults and adults. And it was used as a freshman read in a college. And so I then went pretty early on in the semester, and I had a conversation. I just sort of spoke for about an hour, had a Q&A, and it was lovely. And I got this letter afterward, and it was a freshman in college, and he said, I didn't really read the book before you arrived on campus, but after seeing you, I wanted to read the book. And he said, what I really realized is that I hadn't really fully formed myself yet, and this book really helped me form myself. And I think we have to remember that all books have that, most books, all books really have that power in them. And I think when it comes to this book, I hope that it gives a message that, listen, your voice is really important, young people. It doesn't matter whether you're 6, 16, or 26. Young people's voices are very important, and so often they are silenced just by adults who will rise, or say, kids are seen and not heard, that kind of stuff, that old stuff that I grew up in. But for me, I think that if we can model over and over again, we'll say acceptance, curiosity, questioning what we know to be true. If we don't question what we know to be true, we can't grow. So model growth all the way through life. I often talk to teenagers, especially in high schools, and I say, please don't grow up the way they told you what growing up is. That's not actually growing up. Growing up is growth. You don't decide on one thing and stay that one thing. You get to grow and grow and grow and grow. And when I talk about, let's say, relationships and things like that, I'm like, always know that if you land with someone who just wants you to stay the same, that's not going to be viable in a long-term relationship because you will grow. So I think that's what I hope. I guess I hope people see that the growth is possible and that changing their mind is possible. And it's not a weakness, it's a strength.
It definitely is that. Amy, congratulations to you again on the paperback release of Attack of the Black Rectangle. It's available now, of course, to our friends at Amazon or through your favorite local bookstore. Amy, you mentioned to me that you have a new book also getting ready to be released. How can our audience stay connected with you and for all the updates?
Oh, thanks so much. Yes, I have a new book coming out. It's called Pick the Lock. It's for young adults and adults, so different age groups than Attack of the Black Rectangles. It's called Pick the Lock. And you can keep up with me on social media. Best way to find those is go to my website, which is www.as-king.com. That's the best way to find me.
Well, thank you again for spending some time with us. I'm looking forward to our next chat together, Amy.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Cyrus. Have a great day.
You as well. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Conversations Live. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Thank you all for choosing Conversations Live. Now let's go make today amazing. Take care.